I don't know anyone who wants to be a slave. And what I can say with near certainty is that debt is slavery. Now, that's controversial, and I do realize that people are going to react very strongly, and maybe I should use a different word, but no, debt is slavery. I want to walk through slowly the 10 different reasons that debt is slavery. And the reason that I'm going to work through, I'm going to do the work, you just have to follow along. I'm going to work through the 10 reasons. And the reason that this is so important is that if you don't understand these 10 reasons, especially number 7, if you don't understand this, then you will remain a debt slave. Now, what's interesting is that even if you have your mortgage paid off, you have no credit card debt, you have paid for your vehicles, and you don't owe anyone anything, it's likely that you are still a debt slave and you don't even know it. I'll talk about that along the way and why that matters. All right, so number 1, debt controls your money choices. In other words, if you have money coming in from a job or from a business, the number one thing that's on your mind is paying the bills and paying off the debt. And that's by necessity, because if you do not pay your debts, if you do not pay your expenses, bad things happen. Bad things happen. So debt equals bad things happen when you don't take care of it. Services get shut off, the things get taken away that they might be critical, they might be of critical importance to you, they might be the most important things in the world, and they can get taken away from you. You could lose your home, you could lose your vehicles, you could lose all kinds of things. So you have to handle the expenses and especially the debt, because other people have a claim on your work. They have a claim on the energy and the life that you pour into a job. It's the effort and the time. Now, we can lay the blame at the feet of many different institutions and people, but the reality is the reality. Debt enslaves you, and until the debt is paid off, you have to pay the debt first. Otherwise, again, like I said, bad things happen. So debt controls your money choices. Okay, number 2 is you have to work to pay lenders first. So you work hard, maybe for someone else. So you work very hard, you put your time in, and then you get money for your time. So you have some control over that, but you really don't have much control over your debt once you owe the debt. The only way to discharge the debt, the only way to eliminate the debt is to pay it off. And the longer it takes you and the higher the interest and the more that you stretch it out, the more that other people own you and control you. So you are a slave to not just the debt, you're a slave to the people that own the debt. You see, that's the other side of the equation, is that you took on the debt for whatever reason. Could be a good reason, could be a bad reason, could be some mistakes that you made, could be very, very reasonable, right? Could be, hey, I want a house and I'm going to take out this mortgage, which is debt. So if you think that through, someone owns the mortgage. They own it, and you send money into the bank, and the bank owns the mortgage unless they sold the mortgage off to someone else. But you're paying the bank back. I mean, it's an asset. That mortgage is an asset on their balance sheet. It's not an asset to you. It's a liability to you. It means you are liable for it. You have to pay it. You have to discharge the liability. And then when you send money into the bank, the asset improves for the bank in a variety of ways. Not a perfect example, but it does give you an idea. Like, wait a minute, my debt, the debt that I owe, yes, that's right, it's someone else's asset because it generates income for them. The interest that you pay, you're sending in the principal, of course, but also you're sending in the interest on top of that debt. And it's like, whoa, okay. And that's why people, the banksters, own you. That's why they control your thinking and your actions. They own your time, your most precious and valuable resource. And why do they own your time? Because you must work to generate the income so that you have enough to pay off or to discharge the debt. Hence, slavery. You are a slave to the banksters. That's the way that it is. That's where this comes from. Number 3, The longer it takes you to discharge the liability or pay the debt off, the longer you're going to be paying because interest will continue to accumulate. The debt will continue to be outstanding until it gets paid off. So longer means longer. And that means you're in chains for longer. You are sort of beholden to the bank or whoever you owe, the credit card companies. You are a slave to them for longer and longer, the longer it takes. It's like the worse it gets, the worse it gets. And that is very much like slavery. The longer that you are a slave to something, it could be you're addicted to something, it could be a number of things that you are enslaved to. You're not literally a slave, although some could make that argument. But there is an enslavement of sorts. And it's very often against your will. Okay? So if you want to get a house or a home, it's these days next to impossible to save the entire amount. Some people can do it. Maybe it's an inheritance, or maybe they have, bought and sold certain stocks and they had wild success. Maybe they're employee number 23 at Facebook. Could be anything. So there are people that have the funds, or they save and save and save for like 23 years, and by then they're middle aged, and then they're not enjoying the house the entire time. Right, so all this time, and you're saving and paying off rent as well. It gets very, very tricky. But I digress. Let's get back on track here. Number 4 is you have less freedom. If you owe someone else and there's debt involved, you have less freedom to save for emergencies. You have less freedom to save for emergencies, let alone to save, to invest, to save and then invest, right? You have to take care of your savings first for protection and safety, but you also need the extra money, right? You need excess, you need profits in effect. You need some extra, otherwise you can't invest and have the money work for you. Therefore, you are first and foremost paying off the debt, and you are enslaved to the debt, and you are a debtor, and it's very frustrating, obviously. I'm trying to make it clear, like, how to avoid the debt. And it seems like a roundabout way of doing it, but this is how we avoid getting into debt. We reduce our expectations. We lower our, the amount that we do take on debt when we take on debt, and we pay it off as fast as we can. So we're slaves for less amount of time. That alone is totally worth it. All right, number 5. You are absolutely limiting your future opportunities and your dreams. Instead, you're fueling the opportunities and dreams of those that own the asset, which is your debt. All right, that's pretty clear, I think. Number 6, debt creates constant financial stress. So you're constantly frustrated, constantly stressed out because debt creates that. Now, why does debt create that? Because you can't use it for yourself, and the money can't be used to grow itself. So your future is impaired. Your future is minimized from abundance to less abundance, if nothing else. And that creates stress, and that creates frustration. So the debt changes time frames. The debt creates an emotional reaction. That's enslavement, right? When you have something that's nagging you, when you have something that's poking at you over and over for a long period of time, it goes from being an annoyance to actually being a real wound, to causing real damage, to real loss. So small debts are small annoyances, and big debts become more than big annoyances. They become really detrimental to your mental health and even physical health. That is, again, a type of enslavement. All right. Number 7, it's hard to build wealth with high debt. You can't borrow money and then expect to be able, so you've borrowed, right? So there's debt, and then expect that debt to be used to generate more money, at least not effectively. Now, there are people that do this, but they take on a lot of risk. The people that do this, for example, there are many examples, but for example, are those people that invest in real estate. So not their first home, but let's say their second and third home where it's like rentals. So they put down 10, 20% and they borrow, they go into debt, take out a mortgage for let's say 70 or 80%, and they do that on a couple of homes. Well, that's what leverage is. I'm sure you've heard of leverage. That's leverage. Taking on that debt for the second and third home, that's adding leverage. And there's lots about real estate that's good. I know many multimillionaires that have used real estate to accumulate actual wealth. That's another topic for another day. But the idea is that they are taking on risk. And my proof of that is just look back to the financial crisis, 2007, 8, and 9. People were going bankrupt left, right, and center because they couldn't pay the mortgages on those first homes in some cases, but second and third and fourth homes, those investment homes, because the people that were living in those places didn't have the money to service the debt. They weren't paying for their rent. They couldn't flip the houses anymore. And so it's like, well, I have these tenants. Oh, they're gone. You had the tenants. They're gone. The people that were renting out the homes no longer had the money and they were like, bye bye, see ya. And so that can happen where you take on the debt and it seems safe, there's cash flow and it's wonderful, you did all the numbers, hey, it's totally awesome. But listen, if something dramatic and terrible happens in the economy, do you have the extra money to pay off or pay down that debt on that second and third home month after month? Well, if you're very wealthy, you can do that. If you're not very wealthy, well, you could be extended. You're too far extended and you are at risk. So those people that take on debt to make more money, right, when they extend themselves, they're putting themselves at deep, deep risk. Now, that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, but that actually enslaves you. It enslaves you. You're doing it to yourself. But let's just say this too, that the juice is worth the squeeze for a lot of people until it's not. So a lot of people love real estate. A lot of people use real estate, but it does have that leverage component, which is very, very important. And it is a reason, in my opinion, why debt is slavery, and owning these mortgages can sound good and can look great on paper and can work indefinitely until it doesn't. There are times in history, I gave you an example, the great financial crisis, where debt don't work, right? Okay. So number 8. So debt gets you trapped in a cycle. And very importantly, debt gets you in a habit of habits. And one of the worst habits is debt, paying down the debt. And as the debt gets paid down, you say, my debt's paid off. And then because of that, you feel relief. A lot of people feel great about paying down a debt or paying off a debt, and they think that that gives them room to go out and then buy more using debt instead of saving up and then spending. Now, in no way am I saying, hey, when debt is being paid down, that you shouldn't add more debt on. Well, why would I say that? Because you might have an emergency come up. You might have something unexpected come up. Your wealth and your cash flow might be kind of lumpy, right? Because it's seasonal. Maybe you're making money at certain points of the year. Maybe there's overtime. Maybe it's a side gig. A big client comes in. And so you can take on more debt because you have this other money coming in and you've added risk, but you're able to pay off that debt and then some. So there are nuances here. It's not like people get stuck in the rut and they're done for. But a lot of people do sort of automatically pay down their debt and they get the itch to add more debt on for very often the wrong reasons. So just be aware of the reasons why you're using debt, how you're using debt. Don't get in the mindset or the habit of just paying down the debt and I will always be in debt. And actually, like a little sidebar here, I remember as a kid, I asked my father, it was a very simple question. I said, hey, when will the house be paid off for? Or when will you stop making, mortgage payments is how I think I said it. And he said, never. And I believed him at the time. As a child, when you hear that, it just kind of makes sense because, almost everyone that they either have a mortgage and they keep paying it off. And usually it's a 30-year mortgage, so it's a long time. And then there are other people that are renting and they rent forever. So it seems as though you could never pay off your mortgage. And maybe you never want to pay off your mortgage, and there's reasons for that. Again, a topic for another day, because I've talked a lot about real estate because it's just such a big part of everyone's life in terms of debt, and good debt supposedly. But kind of think about that, right? You could pay down the mortgage, and then that extra money that was being sent in for the mortgage, you could be using to save and then invest. And so now you're building up your assets. Again, lots to talk about there. If you're interested in that topic about real estate, by all means, leave a comment below. All right, number 9 means that the more debt that you have, the less ownership that you have. So let's just use the house example again. If you have a $500,000 home and there's a $400,000 mortgage on that home, that means to you, even though you think it's worth $500,000 to you, that house is actually only worth $100,000 to you. And here's the proof. If you were to go and take your house or the house at $500,000 of value, and it doesn't matter what you paid, I'm just saying that you have $100,000 of equity and $400,000 that you own the mortgage. Forget the nuances there. Just we're working with $100,000 and $400,000. If you put the house on the market and the house sold, you would be able to pocket $100,000, and that's it. You'd only be able to pocket $100,000. So you don't have an asset worth $500,000. You have an asset, even though the sticker price is $500,000, you only get $100,000 if you were to turn around and sell it. $100,000, that's it. Now, I shouldn't say that's it. Obviously, $100,000 is a lot, but it's not $500,000. That's the key. It's not $500,000. That means the greater the debt, the lower your ownership. Now let's flip that around and say, okay, you only have $100,000 left on your mortgage, and the equity in the home is $400,000. Well, now you have a $400,000 asset, and that means that less debt means you have more ownership. It's a beautiful thing when you think about it that simply, right? And this tells you a little bit about assets versus liabilities and what the true value of something is, especially in relationship to debt. All right, and number 10, financial freedom is out of reach if you have debt. Now, I'm not saying any debt, but if you have large debts and large debt payments, then financial freedom is further away from you. And the more debt you have, the further away that financial freedom is for you. The counter argument to that, right? They're like, well, that's not quite true, goes like this. If you generate a tremendous amount of money, either from a job that you have, a very high paying job, or you have, let's say, a business, and you've got crazy amounts of cash flow, well, in that case, there's a certain amount of debt that you can probably have, and it's not going to impact your life, your lifestyle. It's not going to change anything in your community, your family, your friends. There's not much that's going to change if you have a torrent of cash, right? A tsunami of cash coming in every week, every month, every year. If you're getting flooded with cash, well, in that case, it kind of makes sense, right? That you're very, very close to financial freedom. And if you wanted to, you probably could just go boom and pay off that debt if you wanted to do that, and then you do have that freedom. But you kind of know what I'm saying here. You have the feel, you have the vibe. But here's the thing. Let's say it was, this is a tremendous insight that I had probably about 15, 20 years ago. So I was relatively young when I figured this one out. There were people that I knew that were doing fantastic in their jobs and their businesses, and they would always talk about how much money they have. They'd have the sporty cars, beautiful homes. They were dressed to the nines. It was just beautiful, wonderful. And I thought that they were wealthy. And what they had was cash flow. And they had it from their high paying jobs and from their businesses. And then the market struck them, right? The financial crisis is an example. That's a couple of examples exactly. I know a couple people who their business just died off, and that meant that the cash, right, the cash flow died off. Did those people, make it through? Well, not very well, because almost all the people that I'm talking about, when they were a lot younger, they had the cash just gushing, right? The cash was coming in, is that they weren't saving that cash. They weren't saving it. They were spending it, they were using it, they were buying non-productive assets. Put another way, they were consuming, they weren't producing. They were consuming their wealth, they weren't producing. And the way that you would produce wealth from high cash flow is you take the excess cash and you buy assets so that the money can create money. And obviously, if you have a tremendous amount of assets, you can just turn the spigot on anytime you want because you could, get yield out of treasuries or bonds or CDs or stocks, dividend stocks, and so forth. So if you have assets and very low liabilities or low debt, then you can just turn the cash on anytime you want. That's wealth. That's not cash flow. That's wealth. You can turn on the cash flow anytime that you want. This is why some people also are house rich and cash poor. So they have $1 million home, and that's wonderful. But they owe a ton on the house, number one. Number two is they can't extract the cash out of the business, or sorry, out of the house. They can do it with a reverse mortgage, for example. So there are ways of doing that, and there's nuances and things, and there's lots of crazy stuff that goes into this. But when you add all this up, it's really, really important to realize that this is why these reasons are all related, obviously, and they are why debt is slavery. Debt and owing someone or institutions money day in, day out, year in, year out, is what drags you down. It's what causes pain and suffering financially for people. And then the financial pain translates to mental pain, emotional pain, and in some cases, even physical pain. So it's very, very challenging. So I've given you enough here to think about why you're actually up against debt as a thing, as a demon, as a wicked entity. You don't have to blame the banksters. You don't have to blame the credit cards. You don't have to blame the government. Don't worry about the blame. Just realize what debt is and what it's doing. And so now you can say to yourself, well, what can I do to eliminate the debt? What are the actions that I can take to eliminate the debt? And that's one of the things that the Rhodes brothers do tremendously well. We have a wide variety of teachings and trainings, a lot of it free or very, very low cost. So you can figure out how to start a freelancing business, how to, write and produce books on Amazon, as an example, or how to use AI to generate a side income or even start a full-on business. And I could go on and on, but that's exactly what the Rhodes brothers do. And it might be stocks and trading. We have plenty of extra information and teaching and trainings on that as well at all different price points. Now, I'm not selling to you when I say these things. I'm saying look around your environment, look to people that you know, like, and trust and respect, and then figure out what they're doing. Either emulate what they're doing, follow along with what they recommend, look into the ideas of what they are doing. Like, that's an idea. I hadn't thought of that before. This is going to help me. And that's why I bring these things up. It's the investments that you make into yourself that pay the most. The education, like this right here, right now, this experience, this educational experience, will pay you over and over and over again. It'll be in your mind, in the back of your mind. You can have better conversations with friends and family. You can take better notes on things. You can make better goals for yourself. And it's all related to getting out of the slavery that you're already in. And if you're not a debt slave, well, what are the things that you never want to do or try to avoid? That's why this is so powerful. And we do appreciate you. Again, I'm John Rhodes of the Rhodes Brothers. This is Greater Wealth Through Mastery. Please do subscribe. It does matter. Like this video. Share it with someone who you think is going to get value out of it, that you really know is going to get value out of it, because it's from word of mouth referrals like yours that the channel is able to grow, and we all benefit from that. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. My brother Matt and I will see you in the next video. Thank you and take care.